My wife cheated on me with our business partner, then suddenly filed for divorce and claimed I stole $300, $0 from our company. Turns out she was the one draining the accounts and planning to multi-million-dollar litigation behind my back. I never thought I'd be the guy to get like this. One day, everything seemed normal. My wife was the same sharp, fiery woman I married. The next, I found out she was cheating on me with our business partner, Jake, and she was planning to take everything we worked for. It was like a bad movie, only worse because it was real. The craziest part, I only caught her because of a simple, stupid mistake that led me down a rabbit hole I wish I'd never entered. It started about 3 months ago. Had been acting strange, secretive, short-tempered, distracted. At first, I thought maybe she was just stressed from work, or maybe she was having an affair with her boss or something. But then I noticed her phone going off at odd hours, and she'd quickly hide it when I walked by. She'd get defensive if I asked her about her texts or calls, brushing me off with some sarcastic remark about needing privacy. That was unusual because she's usually pretty open with her phone. She'd never been the type to hide things before. Then I started noticing money missing from our joint accounts. Not a little here and there, big chunks. About $50, $0 disappeared over a couple of months. I thought maybe it was a mistake, an accounting error, or maybe I was just paranoid. But I was wrong. Turns out had been draining the accounts little by little, funneling money into a private account she kept hidden. I didn't have access to it. She'd always been the one handling the finances, and I trusted her completely. That was my first real warning sign that something was off. One night, I decided to check our bank statements more carefully, something I'd never done before. I sat down with my laptop and started going through the transactions. And that's when I saw it. A series of transfers to an account I didn't recognize, all under her name but with different addresses. It was obvious she was trying to hide it, but she'd slipped up. My stomach sank. I felt a cold wave of betrayal wash over me. I've been married to her for 8 years. We had 2 kids, a nice house, a business we built from nothing. And now I was looking at proof she'd been lying to my face the whole time. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I waited. I watched her behavior more closely. She was always quick to accuse me of being paranoid or insecure when I pressed her about her phone or her whereabouts. She'd snap back that I was overly suspicious, that she was tired of my accusations. But I knew better. I knew she was hiding something, and I was right. One evening I followed her after work. She went to a fancy hotel downtown, didn't tell me where she was going, and stayed there for hours. I saw her go in with Jake. That's when I knew for sure. They weren't just friends. They were sleeping together. I never thought my wife would cheat on me. Not with Jake, of all people. He's our business partner, for God's sake. We had a partnership that was supposed to be built on trust and mutual respect. And now I found out she was screwing him behind my back, draining our accounts and planning to take everything we had. It was like a punch to the gut. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I had to confront her, but I didn't know what to say or do. I just knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I had to find out the truth. The next day I set up a meeting with her. I told her I knew everything about the affair, the missing money, the secret account. Her reaction: she laughed like I was some paranoid fool. She spun a story about how I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure, that Jake was just a business friend, and that I was imagining things. She called me crazy, said I was paranoid because I didn't trust her. But her eyes gave her away. The sweat on her forehead, the way she avoided my gaze, it was all the evidence I needed that she was lying. When I pressed her further, she started crying, saying she loved me, that she was just stressed and made a mistake. She claimed Jake was just a business partner, that they'd never really crossed a line, that she'd only been with him once to blow off steam, and that it meant nothing. But I could see through her bullshit. I knew she was lying. She always was good at lying, better than I was at catching her. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this was just the surface. Beneath it all, she was planning something darker. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I felt numb, then angry, then hurt. I'd trusted her with my life, my business, my heart. And she'd thrown it all away for some meaningless sex and greed. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this? I started thinking about everything: the money, the business, the kids, our future. All of it was on the line now. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that she cheated or that she was planning to screw me over financially. Honestly, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to protect what was mine and figure out how deep her plans went. I needed evidence, a plan, something to fight back with. I wasn't just going to sit there and get robbed blind. I had to get ahead of her. But I also knew I couldn't confront her again without a clear plan. That's when I started thinking about revenge. Not just to hurt her, but to make her pay for what she'd done, to make her realize she couldn't get away with betraying me and destroying everything we built. That's the point I realized this wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about taking control back. And I was ready to do whatever it took. After that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around her lies, the money she'd stolen, and the fact that she'd been sleeping with Jake behind my back. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut a dozen times over. The betrayal cut deep, but what stung even more was realizing how much I'd trusted her, how blindly I'd believed in our marriage and the partnership we built. She'd been so convincing I'd almost convinced myself I was paranoid. But now I saw her for what she was, a liar, a thief, and a cheat. The next morning, I decided I needed to get my ducks in a row. I couldn't just confront her again without evidence and a plan. I started digging into the financials myself. I hired a private investigator to track her movements, and I hired a forensic accountant to audit our accounts. I needed to know exactly how much she'd drained, where it was going, and who she'd been talking to besides Jake. The accountant found more than I expected. She'd siphoned off hundreds of thousands, possibly even more, into accounts I didn't know existed. She was planning to run, I was sure of it. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on her. She was still acting suspicious, always on her phone, sneaking around. One day, I caught her deleting messages on her phone. I snatched it from her hand and saw the texts she'd been hiding. They were with Jake, obviously. I confronted her again, this time more aggressively. She tried to deny everything, but her face was pale, her hands trembling. She claimed it was just harmless flirting, that Jake was just a business friend, and that I was overreacting. She insisted she loved me, that she'd never hurt me intentionally. But her words sounded hollow, and her eyes betrayed her. I felt a boiling rage inside me, but I kept my cool. I knew I had to be strategic if I wanted to come out of this with some dignity and maybe even some leverage. I decided I'd confront her with all the facts, her secret accounts, the money she'd stolen, the affair. I wanted her to see I wasn't some naive fool anymore. I had evidence. I had witnesses. I wasn't going to be a victim in her game. One afternoon, I sat her down and laid everything out. I showed her the bank statements, the evidence from the investigator, the texts from Jake. Her face twisted into a mask of fury and disbelief. She yelled, called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her, and said I was trying to ruin her. She claimed she was done with Jake, that she'd only been using him for business reasons, and that she never intended to hurt me. But I wasn't buying it. The woman who had been so quick to lie and manipulate had no credibility left in my eyes. Her excuses sounded hollow. I knew she'd been planning her escape, her new life without me, all while pretending to be the perfect wife. That day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I had to protect my assets, my reputation, and my family. I started drafting a plan to get a hold of our legal and financial documents to prepare for what was coming. I also realized I needed to be careful. She was dangerous when cornered. I didn't want her to do something reckless or destructive. I needed to stay calm, collected, and strategic. In the days that followed, she became even more hostile. She accused me of ruining everything, of not trusting her, and of being paranoid. She told friends I was just insecure, that I was jealous because I was losing control. But I knew the truth. I was losing nothing. She was the one who was losing control. I just hadn't realized how deep her betrayal went until then. The thought of her with Jake, betraying me, draining our savings, secretly planning to divorce me and take everything, this fueled my resolve. I started reaching out to my lawyer, gathering evidence and preparing for the inevitable legal battle. I knew she was planning to file for divorce soon, probably claiming I was a bad husband, a thief, or whatever she could spin. That's when I realized I had to be one step ahead. She was trying to set me up, I was sure of it. That's when I decided I'd fight fire with fire and I'd do everything in my power to expose her lies and protect what's mine. I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I was also determined to make her regret every lie, every betrayal, every dollar she stole. And I was going to make sure she paid for it, one way or another. By the time she filed for divorce, I already had my plan in motion. I knew she was trying to spin the story her way, painting herself as the wronged wife, the victim of my paranoia. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate everyone, especially not our lawyer. I had gathered enough evidence to demolish her claims, and I was ready to fight dirty if I had to. All the while, she was still acting bitchy, throwing tantrums and trying to gaslight me into doubting myself. She kept insisting she loved me, that she'd never cheat, that I was just jealous. Yeah, right. The day she served me with divorce papers, I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. Part of me wanted to break down, scream at her, call her every ugly name I knew, but I kept my composure. I knew I had to be smart. I looked at her across the table during that meeting, saw her fake tears and her fake apologies. She was good at acting like the victim. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her. I knew she'd planned this all along, just waiting for the right moment to cut her losses and run with Jake and the money. That's when I realized this wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about protecting what was left of my life. I spent the next few days working with my lawyer, compiling everything. All the bank statements, the texts, the financial transactions, the hidden accounts. I handed it over. We prepared for a nasty fight, and I knew she'd try to spin it as me being the bad guy. She'd lie, manipulate, and probably try to accuse me of stealing from the company, just like she did in her divorce filing. She claimed I embezzled $300, $0, ridiculous, considering I'd been handling the finances responsibly for years. But I knew her game. She was trying to set me up just like she'd set me up with the affair. Meanwhile, she kept up her act of being the wronged wife, crying and whining about how I was destroying her reputation. She went as far as calling friends, trying to paint me as a jealous, insecure man who was trying to control her. It was laughable, really. I knew her better than anyone. She was a bitchy, manipulative woman who'd do anything to get her way, whether it was draining our savings, cheating, or lying her way out of trouble. I just had to stay calm and keep my evidence ready. One afternoon, I caught her trying to transfer more money out of our account. I was watching the bank alerts on my phone, and I saw her initiate another transfer. I confronted her right then and there. She looked surprised, but her face quickly hardened. She told me it was for the kids, that she was just trying to secure their future. Yeah, right. I called her bluff and told her I'd already hired an accountant to freeze all transactions. That shut her up for a while. She started yelling, calling me controlling, accusing me of trying to ruin her. But I knew her game. She was desperate and her time was running out. Her reaction to everything was classic. She'd throw tantrums, scream, cry, and then try to guilt-trip me. She said I was jealous, that I didn't trust her, that I was trying to ruin her life because I was insecure. But I knew better. I knew she was the one who had been secretly draining our accounts, sleeping around with Jake, and trying to cut me out of the picture. I felt a strange mixture of disgust and pity. Disgust because she was a liar and a thief, and pity because she was so desperate to save her own ass that she'd lie and manipulate her way out of everything. I also started digging into her phone and emails more aggressively. I needed to find more proof of her betrayal and her plans. I knew she'd keep lying, but I wanted to be ready. I found some incriminating messages, more with Jake, talking about how she was going to leave and take everything. She had plans to divorce me, drain the business account, and run off with Jake and the money. That's when I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. The worst part, watching her act so bitchy and entitled. She'd call me paranoid or jealous while scheming behind my back. She'd always been good at lying, but now her lies were starting to unravel. I felt like I was in a war I didn't want to be in, but I knew I had no choice. I had to protect my assets, my reputation, and my kids. I couldn't let her destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. That's when I realized I had to go full throttle. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about stopping her from taking everything I had. And I was more than ready to do whatever it took to make her regret crossing me. The legal battle was about to get nasty, and I knew I had to be prepared for everything. Was a master manipulator, and her entire game was about making herself look like the victim while she cleaned out the bank accounts and planned her next move. She was already spinning stories to friends and even to her lawyer, claiming I was some jealous, controlling husband who'd lost his mind. I could see her trying to frame me as the bad guy, but I had enough evidence to blow her story apart. Still, I had to stay sharp and keep my emotions in check. In the meantime, I hired a private investigator to follow her around. I needed to know exactly where she was going, who she was meeting, and what she was planning. Turns out, she'd been meeting with Jake almost daily. They'd been meeting at various hotels, restaurants, and even some private homes. The investigator caught her sneaking into a condo downtown. I was stunned when I saw the footage. She was planning to disappear with Jake, and she'd already started moving some of the remaining money into secret accounts. It was clear she was trying to set me up for a divorce, thinking she'd walk away with a huge chunk of the business and savings. I also had our financial team run a deeper audit on all our accounts. We discovered she'd been funneling money into offshore accounts trying to hide her tracks. I was furious. She was draining our business, stealing from our future, and lying to my face all at once. I realized she had no intention of stopping. She was planning to leave me, take the kids, and start a new life with Jake and the money she'd stolen. That's when I decided I had to take control of the situation. I sat her down again, this time with all the evidence laid out on the table. I showed her the footage, the bank statements, the offshore account details. Her face turned pale and she started to panic. She tried to deny everything, but I cut her off. I told her I knew about her affair, her secret accounts, and her plans to run. Her excuses. She claimed she was just stressed, that Jake was a business partner, and that she'd never meant to hurt me. But her words sounded hollow, and her eyes kept darting around looking for an escape route. She insisted she loved me and that she'd never cheat or steal from me intentionally. She begged me to forgive her, claiming she'd changed, that she'd stop seeing Jake and return the money. But I saw through her fake tears. I knew she was lying again. She always was good at lying, but I had her cornered now. I told her if she wanted to leave, fine, but I wasn't going to let her take everything without a fight. I was going to fight for my rights, for my business, and for my kids. The day she moved out was a relief and a punch at the same time. She packed her bags and left, but not before throwing a huge scene. She called me every name in the book: controlling, paranoid, insecure. She accused me of ruining her life, of trying to keep her prisoner. She even claimed I'd been abusing her emotionally. That was her game: try to turn everyone against me, make herself look innocent. But I knew better. I knew she was just trying to save herself from going to jail, from losing her freedom, and from being exposed for the liar she was. While she was gone, I continued gathering evidence and preparing for the next phase. I knew she'd try to spin the divorce in her favor, claiming I was a terrible husband, a thief, or worse, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I had already contacted my lawyer, and we started working on a comprehensive legal strategy. I also hired a forensic accountant to dig deeper into her financial manipulations. The goal was to freeze her assets, recover what she stole, and make sure she couldn't just walk away with everything intact. In the midst of all this chaos, I realized how much she'd lied and manipulated me for years. She was so bitchy, so entitled, throwing tantrums, lying, cheating, draining our savings. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe longer. And all I was doing was trying to hold everything together, trying to protect what was mine. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Sadness because I'd lost the woman I thought I knew, and anger because she had betrayed everything we built. But I also felt relief. Relief that I was finally taking control, that I was fighting back. Now I'm waiting for the court date. I know she's going to try every trick in the book to get what she wants, but I'm ready. I've got the evidence, the law on my side, and a determination to make her pay for what she's done. I don't want her to walk away with a dime more than she deserves, and I sure as hell don't want her to destroy what's left of my life. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about dignity, respect, and making sure she understands she can't keep lying and cheating her way through life. I've learned a lot from this mess. Trust is fragile, and betrayal cuts deep. But I also learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it means tearing everything down first. The court date finally arrived, and I knew this was going to be the defining moment. Had been relentless in her attempts to spin her story, painting herself as the wronged wife, the victim of my supposed paranoia and control. She had her lawyer, her sob stories, and her fake tears ready. But I had something she didn't: hard evidence. Every bank statement, every hidden transfer, every message from Jake that proved her betrayal. I was ready to lay it all out, and I knew the truth would come to light. When I sat across from her, in that courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of calm and rage. She looked at me with those bitchy, manipulative eyes, trying to appear innocent, trying to guilt me into backing down. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I had prepared my statements, my evidence, and my witnesses. I knew her game, and I was going to expose her for everything she was. The hearing was brutal. She tried to claim I was emotionally abusive, that I'd been controlling and jealous, trying to turn the judge against me. But I countered with facts, proof of her draining our accounts, her affair with Jake, her plans to leave with the money. I presented the bank statements, the offshore account info, the messages. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind as her lies unraveled. Her lawyer tried to argue that I was a bad husband, that I'd neglected her, that I'd stolen from the company. But I shot back with evidence that proved otherwise. I had every transaction documented, every suspicious transfer flagged, and witnesses ready to testify that I'd been responsible and loyal. It was clear she'd been the one orchestrating the chaos, draining our savings and trying to frame me for her crimes. As the judge deliberated, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I'd fought tooth and nail, and I knew I'd won the battle for now. The judge ruled in my favor, freezing her assets, ordering her to return the stolen money, and restricting her access to our joint accounts until the final settlement. The look on her face was priceless, shock mixed with fury. She realized her game was up and she couldn't manipulate her way out of this one. But the victory was bittersweet. I knew she'd be furious, and I knew she'd try to retaliate in other ways. Sure enough, after the court, she stormed out, screaming and calling me every name under the sun. She accused me of ruining her life, of destroying her reputation. But I didn't care. I was done playing her game. I had finally taken control, and I was going to protect what was left. In the days following, I started the process of rebuilding. I filed for divorce, made arrangements for the kids, and began the long road to recovery. I also started working with financial advisors to secure my assets and ensure she wouldn't drain anything else. I didn't trust her anymore. She'd shown her true colors, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I'd been betrayed, yes. I'd been hurt, definitely. But I'd also stood my ground and fought back. That made me feel powerful, even if I was exhausted. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, something I took for granted. Betrayal cuts deep, and sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the most. But I also learned that revenge isn't about hurting her back, at least not entirely. It's about protecting yourself, standing up for what's right, and not letting anyone, especially a bitchy wife get away with destroying what you built. I'm still healing, still rebuilding, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never let anyone betray me like that again. And next time I'll be more careful about who I trust. Now that everything is settled, I've had some time to reflect on what all this taught me. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the guy to go through something like this, betrayed by the woman I loved, by her lies and fighting to keep what was mine. It's a brutal lesson in trust, or rather, in how fragile it can be. I used to think that honesty and loyalty were the foundation of any good relationship, but I learned the hard way that those qualities can be manipulated or completely absent when someone is willing to lie, cheat, and steal. What's left now is a mix of bitterness and relief. Bitterness because I lost so much time, money, the future I envisioned with her. Relief because I finally see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who prioritized her greed and her affair over everything else. She thought she could walk out of this with a clean slate, with my assets and my reputation in her pocket. But I made sure she paid for it. Every lie, every betrayal, every dollar she drained. I fought for every inch of my dignity and won. The most important lesson I've learned is to never underestimate the people closest to you. Trust is earned, not given blindly. And if you suspect someone is hiding something or acting out of character, don't ignore those signs. Dig deeper. Protect yourself. Because when the truth finally comes out, it's often messier and more painful than you ever imagined. But it's also necessary. Sometimes you have to fight to reclaim what's yours, even if it costs you everything. I also learned that revenge isn't about hurting her back, at least not in the way you might think. It's about making sure she understands her actions have consequences. It's about protecting your future and your kids from the chaos she tried to unleash. I've become more cautious, more guarded, but also more aware of my own strength. I won't let anyone take advantage of me again. As I move forward, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life piece by piece. The pain will fade, but the lessons will stay with me. I'll never forget what happened, but I'll use it to be better, more aware, more resilient. I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar learns from my experience. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't be afraid to fight for what's right. And most importantly, never let betrayal define you. Because in the end, the only person responsible for your happiness and your future is yourself.